If even one guard moves, the world will remember only that. That was the warning, echoing throughout the royal palace just hours before the ceremony began. A day meant for stillness, a moment steeped in centuries of tradition, where every royal guard was expected to uphold their oath with unwavering discipline. But when the moment arrived, one guard defied it all. As the Queen passed in her gilded carriage, the royal guard, known for his unshakable discipline and years of flawless service, did something no one could have ever predicted. He stood tall, but he didn't salute. He didn't move as expected. Instead, slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward. The world watched, expecting the usual protocol to be followed. Yet, in that quiet, unexpected moment, he broke rank. There was no protest, no grand gesture, no hesitation, just an action driven by something deeper than duty, a personal decision that would resonate beyond the palace walls. His hand, steady as a rock, held no weapon, no threat. But in that moment, he carried a small, folded piece of paper pressed tightly against his chest, concealed from the onlookers, yet symbolic of something far greater. What he did next would change the course of royal history forever. Before we reveal why he made this choice, tell us where you're watching from. And stay with us, because this story, this moment, would shake the monarchy to its core. The royal guard, whose name had become synonymous with unwavering loyalty, had served the monarchy for decades. From the moment he donned the uniform, he had committed himself to a life of service. He was known for his flawless execution of duty, no task too small, no ceremony too grand for him to give everything he had. He stood tall through every royal procession, every state dinner, and every coronation, silently ensuring the security of the royal family without ever stepping into the limelight. His reputation was nothing short of legendary. First to arrive at his post, last to leave, and always at attention. Unwavering in his precision. No task was too difficult, no order too complex. Whether it was a state visit from a foreign dignitary or a quiet day in the palace, he could always be counted on to maintain his impeccable presence. His uniform was always pristine. His stance always perfect. He was the picture of loyalty, the epitome of the royal guard's legacy, and he carried the weight of tradition on his shoulders without a single complaint. What set him apart wasn't just his dedication to duty, but the bond he quietly shared with the Queen. Over the years, their connection deepened, though few knew its extent. While the monarchy remained a formal institution, there was a mutual understanding between the two. A silent acknowledgement passed in fleeting moments, like the briefest of glances during ceremonial events. In the midst of the crowds, he stood closest to her, always watching, always alert, but never intruding on her space. There was something sacred about his position, a quiet protector always ready, yet rarely seen. His loyalty was absolute, his presence a constant source of strength to her and the crown. Every royal event, every grand occasion, the guard had been there, standing steadfast. From the most magnificent occasions to the smallest, most personal of moments, he had always followed protocol with precision. He'd become as much a part of royal tradition as the palace itself, his life deeply intertwined with the monarchy he had sworn to protect. Yet, while the public saw only the surface, his disciplined exterior, there was so much more to his service. The years of quiet loyalty, the weight of unspoken words shared only with the Queen, and the sacrifices made in silence. This loyal servant, once the cornerstone of royal tradition, had spent years shaping the monarchy's future with every step he took. But now, in one seemingly inconsequential moment, The world was about to see a shift in that legacy, a break from tradition that would leave an indelible mark on history. In the final years of his service, something began to shift inside the Guard. The perfection that had defined his service, his strict adherence to duty, his unshakable discipline, began to feel hollow. What had once been an unquestioned commitment to the crown now began to feel like a heavy burden. The duties he had carried out without hesitation seemed to weigh on him more with each passing day. Where once his service had been a source of pride, now it felt more like an obligation. He was the same man, standing tall and strong, but inside the Guard began to question. He had lived for years by a set of rules, serving with unmatched loyalty, but now the very foundation of that loyalty seemed uncertain. It wasn't that he no longer loved the monarchy or respected the Queen. It was the shifting nature of the institution itself that troubled him. Something wasn't right. He had devoted his life to a cause, but now the cause seemed to be losing its original purpose. The more he observed, the more disillusioned he became. Royal decisions that had once seemed noble now appeared to be rooted in a desire for power, a desire to preserve the monarchy rather than serve the people. The grandeur, the ceremony, the royal processions, it all seemed so distant from the real world, where people were struggling, where change was needed. And yet, the Queen, who he had stood by all these years, was surrounded by advisers who seemed more concerned with protecting the crown than ensuring the welfare of the people. Every decision made from the palace felt like a reflection of something far removed from the ideals he had once stood for. The Queen, his steadfast leader, had always been a symbol of grace and wisdom, but even she, in his eyes, had become a figurehead in a system that was losing touch with the very ideals of duty and service. He found himself questioning, what had he pledged loyalty to all these years? Was it truly the crown, or was it the greater ideals of justice, honor, and service to the people? It wasn't one grand moment that changed everything. It was a gradual realization, like a cloud slowly covering the sun. But the true turning point came during a routine procession. The Queen's carriage passed by, just as it had countless times before. The air was thick with formality, the crowds lining the streets to pay their respects. The Guard, as always, stood in his position, poised and still. But this time, something was different. This time, the weight of the moment pressed heavier than ever. As the Queen's carriage approached, the familiar rhythm of the procession seemed to slow down. The Guard felt it, too, an undeniable sense that he had reached a point of no return. The question loomed in his mind. What was he truly loyal to now? Was it the crown, the institution that had stood for centuries? Or was it something else? Something deeper, something that demanded him to act differently in this moment. His years of unquestioned loyalty had brought him here, but now the very foundation of his service was being tested. He could feel the tension in his chest as the carriage approached. The Guard's gaze softened, his hand trembling ever so slightly as he tightened his grip on his rifle. Was he still loyal to the idea of duty he had spent a lifetime upholding? Or was his loyalty now shifting toward something more meaningful, something more personal? In that brief moment, as the Queen's carriage passed by, the Guard made a decision that would change everything, a decision that until now had never seemed possible. His actions in this moment would define not just his loyalty, but his legacy. As the Queen's carriage rolled past, the Royal Guard stood motionless, his face as composed as ever. The moment was as routine as any other in his decades of service. But as the carriage drew near, the Guard did something no one could have expected. Without a word, without hesitation, he slowly lowered his rifle. The movement wasn't abrupt, nor was it a statement of protest. It was deliberate. It was personal. For years, the guard had followed protocol with unwavering precision. He had saluted every monarch, every dignitary, every royal figure without fail, without question. But today, something inside him had changed. Instead of raising his rifle in salute, he lowered it. He took a single step forward, breaking rank. This wasn't a flippant act of rebellion, nor was it a rash decision. It wasn't born from anger or dissatisfaction. It was something quieter, something far deeper, rooted in his growing internal conflict. The world around him remained oblivious to the shift. The crowd, oblivious to the guard's subtle defiance, cheered as the Queen's carriage passed by, lost in the spectacle of the moment. The cameras, as usual, were trained on the grandeur of the procession, capturing the perfect images of tradition. But none of them captured the quiet rebellion unfolding just a few feet away from the Queen herself. The subtle movement of the guard's action, slow and deliberate, was missed by the cameras, unnoticed by most. But there was one person who saw it: the Queen. As the guard lowered his weapon, he didn't just break the rules. He made a statement, a personal one that said more than words could convey. In that fleeting moment, the Queen's eyes met his, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of the choice he had made. The act was silent, but it was loud enough for her to understand the message. The guard didn't return to his post. Instead, he stood there for a moment that felt like an eternity as the procession moved forward. He didn't snap back into position. He didn't salute again. And then, with a final glance at the Queen, he stepped away from his post. What followed was something no one had expected. The guard left the ceremony altogether. He didn't take up his position with the others. He walked away from the royal procession and disappeared into the crowd, choosing to step away from the duty he had lived by for so many years. The question lingered in the air. What did this action mean? Why had he chosen to defy tradition? Why now, at the height of the ceremony, had he decided to abandon his post and what had once been his life's mission? His decision wasn't merely about breaking protocol. It was about questioning everything he had stood for. What had driven him to make this drastic choice? What had changed in that moment? The action wasn't a simple act of disobedience. It was a profound moment of transformation, a realization that sometimes the greatest loyalty is not in following orders, but in standing up for what one believes is right. The guard's journey had just begun, and in leaving his post, he had set in motion a new mission, one that would lead him far from the life he had known, one that would redefine his understanding of duty and loyalty. After the royal procession, the palace was in turmoil. The guard's actions had stirred the staff, the royal advisors, and the military leadership. His failure to salute during the Queen's procession was not something easily overlooked. Whispers spread like wildfire, and speculation ran rampant. What had driven the guard to break centuries of tradition? Was it a momentary lapse? Or had something deeper prompted this unprecedented act? The Queen's personal advisor summoned the guard to a private meeting. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Everyone in the palace wanted answers. The guard's colleagues, who had spent years alongside him, couldn't fathom what had happened. How could the most loyal of servants defy the very institution he had sworn to protect? Behind closed doors, the guard stood tall, his uniform as pristine as ever. But the tension in the room was palpable. As the Queen's personal advisor questioned him, the guard remained composed. His eyes, once filled with unwavering loyalty, now reflected something more, an earnest desire for change, not defiance. When asked to explain his actions, the guard's voice was steady but firm. He spoke not of rebellion, but of a deeper truth. It wasn't a refusal to serve, he said. It was a refusal to blindly follow a system that has forgotten its true purpose. The guard spoke of the people, the very ones whom the crown was meant to serve. He spoke of the growing disillusionment he had felt over the years, as the royal family became more of a symbol of tradition and power, rather than a beacon of hope and guidance for the people. He spoke of the widening gap between the monarchy and the citizens it was meant to protect. His refusal to salute wasn't a personal act of rebellion. It was an act of integrity, an act of standing up for the values he believed in, values that had become lost in the face of endless ceremony and institutional expectations. The guard's words were powerful, and they hung in the air between them. He wasn't rejecting the crown, he explained. He was rejecting the idea of an institution that no longer connected with the people it served. The Queen listened quietly, her expression unreadable. She had known the guard for years, seen his dedication and his loyalty to the crown, but now she saw something else, something deeper. She understood the guard's shift. His actions, though unconventional, were not born from rebellion or disdain. They were born from a deep love and commitment to the values the monarchy was meant to represent. Instead of reprimanding him, the Queen sat in silence for a long moment, contemplating his words. She had seen the shift in him, the growing discomfort with the system that had once defined his life. In that moment, the Queen realized that his act of defiance wasn't just about rejecting protocol. It was about calling for a transformation of the monarchy, of the royal family, and of the very principles that had made the monarchy what it was. Rather than scolding him for breaking protocol, the Queen responded with an understanding that shocked the guard. She thanked him for his honesty and the courage to speak the truth. She acknowledged that perhaps the monarchy, in its pursuit of tradition and power, had lost sight of the people it was meant to serve. Her calm response to his actions spoke volumes. She knew that change was necessary, and the guard had become the voice for that change. The Queen saw in his defiance a call for renewal, a reminder that the monarchy should not just exist for its own preservation, but to serve the nation and its people. In a quiet but profound way, the guard's action had shifted something inside the Queen, something that would influence her reign and the future of the monarchy itself. What had begun as an act of defiance became a catalyst for change, and the guard, in his silent act of rebellion, had earned the Queen's deepest respect. The palace acted quickly and decisively in the wake of the guard's actions. It was clear that his refusal to salute the Queen during the procession had broken a long-standing tradition that was the backbone of the monarchy's image. The shock waves of his defiance rippled through the royal household, and the decision was made to quietly remove him from his post. There was no formal punishment, no public disgrace. Instead, the guard was dismissed from his ceremonial duty without fanfare. His resignation wasn't a result of a reprimand, but rather a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement that he had crossed a line, one that couldn't be ignored, no matter the circumstances. The reasons behind his actions were not made public, and, for the most part, the press played along with the silence. The royal family preferred to keep the matter hidden from the world, concerned that further disclosure might tarnish the monarchy's carefully cultivated image. But inside the palace, the conversations were anything but quiet. As the guard's dismissal took place behind closed doors, a much larger conversation began to unfold among the royal household. The Queen's advisors, military officers, and trusted confidants were divided on how to interpret the guard's actions. Some saw it as an act of betrayal, an affront to the monarchy, a moment where a servant had abandoned his duty. To them, the guard's failure to salute was a line in the sand that could not be crossed without consequence. But there was another group, those who understood the guard's decision, and the quiet courage it took to break from tradition. They recognized that his defiance wasn't an attack on the crown, but a challenge to the very structure that upheld it. The guard had raised a question that the monarchy had long avoided. What was the role of the royal family, if not to serve the people? It wasn't lost on the Queen's inner circle that his act of defiance had highlighted the growing disconnect between the monarchy and the public. The monarchy had become a symbol of tradition and power. But had it lost sight of its true purpose? Was it serving the people, or was it simply preserving itself? The guard's actions had ignited a conversation that was long overdue, one about loyalty, duty, and what it truly meant to serve. The debate about the monarchy's responsibility to the people was no longer just theoretical. It had become a lived reality, challenged by the quiet rebellion of a single man. The guard's defiance left an indelible mark on the royal family and the monarchy as a whole. It wasn't just about a single moment of broken protocol. It was about a challenge to the very foundations of the institution. The royal family had always prided itself on its stability, its unchanging nature, and its steadfastness to tradition. But the guard's action showed that even the most entrenched traditions could be questioned. In the aftermath, the royal household found itself grappling with the question of what it meant to be loyal to the crown, to the people, and to the ideals that had sustained the monarchy for centuries. The monarchy's commitment to tradition, while valuable, could no longer be an excuse for ignoring the evolving needs and expectations of the people. As time passed, the guard's actions remained a topic of quiet reflection within the palace. His defiance had exposed the cracks in the royal family's carefully curated image. But more importantly, it had sparked a shift, one that would reverberate through the monarchy for years to come. His act of rebellion, though quiet, had become a catalyst for change, forcing those within the royal family to reconsider their role in a world that was rapidly changing. The guard had stepped away from tradition to serve a higher purpose, and in doing so, he had shown the monarchy that sometimes it is the silence that speaks the loudest. After his dismissal from the palace, the guard left the life he had known for so long. The royal ceremonies, the uniform, the unwavering loyalty to the crown, all of it was behind him. He chose a different path, one where he wasn't confined by duty, but driven by a deeper sense of purpose. He didn't seek fame or recognition for his actions. His new life was not about public attention or acclaim. It was about personal redemption and rebuilding what had been lost. For the guard, this wasn't just about breaking protocol. It was about rebuilding something much bigger, the ideals of service, truth, and justice that had been overshadowed by a system that no longer served its people. In his newfound life, the guard took on a mission that was personal, not political. He sought to reconnect with the core values of duty, values that had once been distorted by power. He spoke to individuals, started small conversations about loyalty, truth, and the role of power in society. His defiance, while small in the grand scale of history, had paved the way for something larger, the recognition that even in the face of authority, one person's conscience could be a force for change. Though the guard's defiant act was small, only a single moment in time, it left a lasting impact on those who witnessed it, and even those who heard the story later. It became a symbol of personal conscience in the face of authority, a reminder that questioning the system wasn't always an act of rebellion, but sometimes it was an act of loyalty to a higher cause. The guard's decision would be remembered for generations as a quiet act of bravery, a challenge to the very system that had shaped the monarchy for centuries. His name would be remembered not for the defiance, but for what it represented: the courage to stand alone for what was right, even when tradition demanded silence. Though the royal family never publicly acknowledged his act, it didn't need to. The guard's legacy was not tied to royal approval. It was tied to the change he inspired in the hearts of those who understood what true loyalty meant. His defiance had started a conversation about justice, about truth, and about the balance of power. And through it all, he had become a beacon of moral clarity in a world that was often blinded by tradition. Was the guard's act of defiance a betrayal, or was it the highest form of loyalty? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes that sometimes breaking protocol is the only way to protect what matters most.